Alrighty guys, welcome back to Ether Bennett's Garage. Today, this old brown Scout's gonna be back on the channel. So I think last time it was just a basic walk around, but today, do a little bit of grafting here. I remember last video I talked about we were gonna put a 10 bolt rear in it. Well, recently, stumbled across this beautiful 14 bolt. That funny thing is if you take get some adapters machined, you can bolt fancy little 6-lug adapters on it, and all of a sudden you have a 6-lug 14 bolt that you will not be able to break. So we're gonna put that in this. Well, let me show you some stuff that's been done since last time y'all saw it. The front axle has been put in. I mean, we custom that deal out. It's sitting on 6-inch lift leaf springs, which we didn't even have to cut the spring perches off. The pinion angle looks a little weird right now, pointed at the transfer case, but it might need a shim here. But we're thinking that's also because it's leaning back a little bit, and so it really is almost a perfect pinion angle. And then a couple things else that happened is the bumper came off, and these little frame stiffeners have been added on. So at the C of the frame, which I mean these Scout frames are like paper, and so there's been 1/4-inch plate has been added to it. This is all my buddies. He added 1/4-inch plate, which both sides, and because we're using K10 springs, they're longer, and so he had to add on to the frame this much. Which thing is though, is if it's going to be sitting, it's probably going to be taller than it is right now, which I mean it's at my waist. You're going to need a big bumper to stand on, so it's like, why not have longer springs, more travel? But we'll try to get in a little bit of the science of putting these springs on that 14 bolt under this to get pinion angle and make sure we're square to the frame and square to the front axle, which we squared the front axle to the frame, so it should be squaring this axle to the frame. But stranger things have happened and this frame could be tweaked, because I mean this is like very beefy, but if you look at the front, this is the frame. The whole frame is thin. If on my Scout, if you pick up the front end with a high lift jack, the frame will flex up. And then whenever I used to have doors on it, whenever you put jack stands at the rear spring perch, the frame would sag so much the front door wouldn't latch. Which this is a poor design on Scout's part, because if there's no upper support in the body, and so it's very easy for the doors to come unlatched. But alrighty, we're gonna get to it. We'll catch up with y'all. Alrighty guys, so we got our full floater with these 6 lugs. Hindsight 2020, should have gotten these flanges on the axles turned down a little bit more. And definitely gonna go with some Allen head bolts here. But for fit up and mock up right now, this is just fine. The wheel is seated all the way onto the adapter. Confident this is going to be very okay. Now, my buddy, Mr. Browning, has spent ample time with the tape measure, measuring to make sure that it is true, square, and all of that good stuff. And I think he's currently making a plumb bob right now, but for what I haven't really figured out, which this is just your standard saltwater fishing rig. Just don't ask questions. We got our jack under the pinion. I mean, I just gotta say, it's a massive axle. Disc brake conversion. Another thing to consider is that what we are doing may not be exactly textbook, but I'm sure it's going to work out. It always does. So, we'll let y'all know once we start mocking up axles and leaf springs and stuff. Okay, so, in case you're wondering, this is what the plumb bob's for. So, it's hung the outside of the frame rail, and it comes down to your spring perch, where your spring sits, and so it is making it so we can center the axle spring perch on the frame. So you have your weight, the rope. That is what the spring perch was for. Just want to make that clear. All right, so as y'all can tell, we kind of fast forwarded a little bit here. Last time we were with y'all, I think we were figuring out where the spring perches went on the axle, which we did that with the plumb bob, which y'all saw. And then essentially we measured we figured out where we wanted the axle to sit, and we measured the spring from the center of the eye to the center of this bolt. And honestly, my buddy tacked the spring perch on the frame first. Because with the front axle, whenever we did the front axle, we had to tack the spring perches we had to tack the spring hangers to the frame based off of the shackle, based off of where the springs mount to the axle. So here, we didn't have this mounted, so we wanted to mount it wherever it was most optimal on the frame. So we tacked that. We then put the leaves on and found out that the overload made it sit too tall. So we took the overload off, put them back on, and right now, the springs are just sitting on the bottom of the frame. And with how because this is where we want it to sit. It leans, if you put a angle finder on the bed rail, it reads like 0.7 degrees leaning back. And that is with the NV4500 in the bed. And that is not a light transmission. It's probably like 300 pounds. So, and we don't want it to sit any farther back or honestly a little bit farther back wouldn't hurt, but no more farther forwards. So the idea that we have come up with, which it might change, I don't really know, is that you cut the frame right here and you have your shackle mount that goes on the frame, and then you have, all this goes away. Shackle mount, shackle, and then that gives you the articulation you need for not breaking your spring and giving the spring full movement. But I mean, she's pretty slick the way she sits right now. And also the other thing I think about on these leaf spring vehicles that we honestly encountered last night was that my buddy was measuring the front axle from the lip in to the frame, which I know that's probably not the most precise measurement, but it's consistent enough. And he found that it was an 1/8 inch off. He thought we had the front axle an 1/8 inch off. And we squared the rear axle to the front axle, so that way it wouldn't wear tires funny. And we rolled it outside, and he put a tape on the exact same spot again, and all of a sudden, the front axle's dead nuts on. I don't know if that was misreading the tape measure, which it was not misreading it with it being dead nuts on. But with these springs, you have the bushings. And those bushings give you a little bit, which for us, we're considering cutting the front axle off again and redoing it so it wasn't an 1/8 inch off. But it's, as of now, I don't know if we put a tape on it now what it would read, but really not worried about it because she looks awful sexy, and I don't think it's gonna wear tires funny. Now it just is a matter of getting shocks, brake lines, rear shackles. That needs to go in it so the 4-speed can come out. I think we're gonna convert to a Hydro Boost setup. So this Scout Master is going away. You're getting a Hydro Boost and power steering. Because we just today, honestly, cut off the steering box with this plasma cutter. Which these steering boxes are custom. Anyways, I think that's gonna about wrap up today's video. I really don't know too much else, and pretty cool. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all don't have too much fun.